So good afternoon, and thanks for staying with us. Although perhaps slightly less known than our programs in sub-Saharan Africa, Opportunity has significant operations in Asia and has for the last 40 years. These programs are changing millions of lives in India, in Indonesia, the Philippines, and China. Opportunity works in underserved areas where the needs are enormous. And I thought I would provide, just before we get to our panelists, some context in terms of some numbers. India's population is 1.25 billion people. That's 4 times the US population in 1/3 the space. In India, 900 million people out of the 1.25, for you math people, that's 72%, live in poverty, and 60% don't have access to basic sanitation, such as toilets or latrines. So in India, we work through 12 program partners who together serve 2.2 million families. So that's on an average family size of 5, more math, 11 million people that we're reaching. In Indonesia and the Philippines, half the populations of those countries live in poverty. So as you can see, we work in areas where the needs are just absolutely enormous. Our programs in Asia are healthy, growing, effective, and sustainable, and you will hear more about them right after we watch this video.
Since 1971, Opportunity International
My first question is for Chris. You and your family recently spent 3 years living in India. Tell us some of your experiences there.
I'd love to. Some of the photos that you saw in the introduction were actually mine. They were from a particular trip that I took to visit one of our partners in a place called Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh, along with perhaps Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, are some of the most desperately poverty-stricken areas on the planet. I hope you recall just a building in more or less a dry field. I went into that building. And I think many of you will recall the parable of the lost coin. When a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one, won't she light a lamp and sweep out her house until she finds it? And frankly, in most of our experience, the answer to that question is no. She won't do that. She won't need any extra light, and she won't need to sweep a dirt floor. She'll be able to find the coin, no problem at all, in a carpet or something like that. But in that house, with a thatched roof and adobe construction and one door, and straight opposite the door, a dung stove and no windows, that's exactly what she will do if she loses money, if she loses a coin. So that hut in Madhya Pradesh today is equivalent to living conditions in first century Palestine. And again, in that location, the people are so desperately poor, it's very common for microfinance clients in India, particularly women, to use their loan to buy a cow or a water buffalo, a milk animal. In Madhya Pradesh, they can't afford milk animals, they buy goats instead. And that trip left, I think, an absolutely indelible impression on me. just about how difficult conditions can be in India. And so that's one experience that I want to share with you. There's another experience that relates that I will also share with you, and that is, we all, I think, understand that India is a place of incredible vibrancy and economic growth, particularly in the tech sector. And so, in the course of my 3 years there, I spent some time looking at potential investment opportunities where people were using very, very simple cell phone technology to provide phone banking connections between clients and financial services institutions. I visited basically a startup in someone's house in a very nice part of Delhi. And I sat around with a group of very young men, actually, and they shared their vision for what they could do to serve millions of Indians with much, much more convenient banking services. And they asked me, you know, why I was there, and I explained my connection with opportunity and the way we'd invested in microfinance in India. And I talked a little bit about the trip that I'd done to Rewa in Madhya Pradesh. And I talked about how difficult the circumstances seemed to be. And I talked particularly about the challenges that the children had. This particular village, I think, was more than 5 kilometres from the nearest school, and it was a government school. And frankly, in India, quite frequently, teachers don't show up, and if they do, they don't teach. So there's an incredible challenge that's faced by those families. And the chief technology officer, who was sitting opposite me, looked straight at me, and he said, "I was one of those village boys. My mother put aside, sacrificially, money from the living that she earned. She went without food sometimes to afford it, to send me to school. And I made something of that, and now I'm here, living effectively the American dream. I'm the chief technology officer in a startup that we would love venture capital investment in. We'd love to do something tremendous in terms of connecting poor Indians to the banking system. Frankly, we'd like to make a lot of money as well." And that just gave me goosebumps, I just have to say.
That's an amazing story. How can we make this happen for more people?
Well, I think you have to answer 2 questions. One is, how can you create the environment where more people are presented with the opportunity, the very narrow, frankly, window of opportunity that was presented to that young man. And I think that is actually about providing resources to families so that they can conduct small businesses, so that they can increase their income and then invest in their children. And in my time in India, I learned Hindi so that I could speak directly to as many women as possible. And I think this goes to the listening to clients story. And the number of women, when I asked what it is you hope for, it's almost like, what is it you want? What is your purpose in life? The answer was always, "I'm conducting these businesses, you dummy, because I want my children to live a different life to the life I live." And so that's the first thing, is opportunity. And the second thing is I think we have to deal with the potential for failure. And in India, that persists in many ways, but there are at least 2 key ways. In Madhya Pradesh, today, in rural Madhya Pradesh, the stats are that 73 children out of 1,000 live births will not be alive by the time they are 5 years old. In Sweden, that number is 2. Now, the good news is that in India, that number in 1990 was around 200. So they've made tremendous progress. But Madhya Pradesh is actually one of the worst child survival locations. And the kids die from infections in the course of childbirth. They die from diarrhea. In fact, they die from being dehydrated. They die from pneumonia, and they die from malaria. These are not complex, difficult conditions that need tertiary or secondary medical systems to solve. We need oral rehydration. We need attended childbirths. We need mothers who actually receive nutrition. You know, we need bed nets. We need very, very simple antibiotics. So microfinance has a role to play in encouraging the creation of affordable, accessible, and proximate healthcare, but it's not complex. And the second thing is, well, there's not much point in a family investing in a child and paying a substantial amount of the income to send them to school if the teacher doesn't show up to teach. That's a pointless waste of money. And that's value, in transformation value, that is left on the table. So we need to do things about those. So we should have an interest in those things. And we do. And we'll get to that, I guess.
Great. Right now. So Mukti is head, as Kathy said, and as you've heard in other sessions, of Healing Fields Foundation, which is based in the northern part of India. As Chris just mentioned, a very, very poor area in the country. Healing Fields under Mukti is having remarkable impact on some of the health issues that Chris just mentioned. So Opportunity Connected, Kashpur, which is one of our finance partners in India, that had lots of clients with Mukti and Healing Fields, which had a really remarkable healthcare system, program, rather. And so my first question for Mukti is, now why would a health NGO partner with a microfinance organization?
Okay, before I answer that, the most important part that Chris left out of his time in India was, I happened in his life. That's how.
That's true.
And that is how opportunity happened in my life. And so we had this program where we were training community health facilitators who were in remote, rural, and tribal areas. And Opportunity came along and said that we would love to experiment with you. There were two things. One is, why would a microfinance want to go out of their security of financial security and move on to something beyond financial security and beyond financial access? That's a question that I keep asking. Not all microfinance institutions think beyond access to financial security. And here we have understood in India, maybe we were a little ahead of the curve where the microfinance bubble burst, and they started looking at microfinance as not the only answer to get people out of poverty. We need to start looking at things which would add value to the financial security of the people, of the women. And with Opportunity, they are facilitating with Kashpur and other microfinance partners in India. We started layering other services like healthcare and educational services. And in my learning in the last 15 years of working with women, one of the things that we have learned from the women is that about 48% of the loans given by microcredit and microfinance institutions go for consumption loans, out of which about 52% goes for a healthcare emergency. And the World Bank, as somebody told in the morning, the most quote-unquote credible source, the World Bank says 30% of the people go below poverty line with just one incident of hospitalization. And this is across the world. And I'm sure that's true for US if you did not have insurance. And so we started our journey in micro health insurance. We were one of the pioneers. And then we realized for insurance to be able to be accessible, you needed healthcare providers, you needed hospitals, or where do you cash out your insurance? Because in India, insurance pays only for hospitalization, not for outpatient care. And it does not pay for eye care, does not pay for dental care. And then we started looking at people were coming into hospitals for preventable illnesses like what Chris was saying.
Sure.
Children were dying because there was no safe drinking water, or there was no access to institutionalization, or there's no access to antenatal care, or there was no access to nutrition for the pregnant mother. And so therefore, the pregnant mother died or fell ill at the time of delivery, or the child dies because the mother is underage. Here I'm going to, I don't know if I'm running off time, but I'm going to tell you a story of one of our clients, microfinance clients, Kashpur, from Kashpur. Her name is Baby Devi. I know that I'm jumping the gun there.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
She was married when she was just 14 years old, 14 or 15 years old. And that is a reality even today, not just for Madhya Pradesh, but for other northern states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Jharkhand. And why do the women, girls get married so early? There are no toilets. There are no sanitary napkins. And when a girl attains menarche, the parents, girls in India, most of you would have heard, are a burden because they are just a responsibility that a parent passes off to the husband. So a girl doesn't belong to you. The girl is born, she has to be given education, she has to be given food, clothes, and then get her married, she changes her name and leaves you and goes away. And it's true, just not for the poor families, even the middle class and the rich families. And when a girl doesn't have a toilet in the house, the women will have to leave home early morning before dawn because they need to go to the bushes. And then in the evening after dusk, so that the men and the boys do not tease them, because we are a very highly populated country. There's nothing as a concept of privacy. So therefore, when they are going into the bushes, they have the men and the boys following them. So they have to wait till nightfall. And that means they cannot drink water during the day. They cannot eat food during the day because they're too scared to go to the toilet. And just imagine a girl who doesn't have sanitary napkins, who doesn't have a toilet in the house, what is she going to be doing? She cannot go to school, so she stays home, and the parents are too scared to leave her home alone. So the best thing is, here, I get you married, and there you go. To the next, you become somebody else's responsibility or not more my responsibility. And so Baby Devi was married when she was just 14 or 15. And she was married and she lived in a joint family with her in-laws, mother-in-law and father-in-law, and a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law. No toilet in the house. It was a joint family, and she produced 3 kids, 2 girls and one son. The kids were going to school. She was very determined that she needed to do something to make sure that her daughters did not face the same issues that Baby Devi did. And she got to know about Kashpur, about the microfinance institution, joined that, and took the first loan. And when I asked her, what did you take the loan for? It was to repay a loan which she had borrowed with a high interest because her father-in-law was sick and was in hospital. That was her first loan. She repaid the loan. She was an agricultural labor. They did not own land. She earned her money and repaid the loan. And after she repaid the first loan, the second loan she took, and she bought her husband a rickshaw. A rickshaw is basically a tricycle which carries passengers and goods around. And this is the story of any poor person in India. He rides a bicycle, he carries huge load. By evening, he's so exhausted, tired, has got body pains. So the best thing to do is to go hit the bottle. And most of his, 50% of his income went into drinking because his body was in so much pain. And he needed to forget that. And Anyways, with the low money that she was getting from her husband, as well as she was earning, she repaid the second loan. And by the time she came to the third cycle, Cash for and Healing Fields offered this program of community health facilitator training, and she joined the training, which was a one-year program. And she didn't know what it was when 5 years ago when we started working with Cash for an Opportunity. We ourselves did not know whether it was just going to be a training, whether it's going to be useful, because we had experimented with it in the south of India, which to me is America as far as I'm concerned in India. The south of India is much more educated, and the north of India is the back and beyond. And so we didn't know what it was all about. So we went in there and we started offering this program. The first part of it was training, education, because we needed to prevent illness. We needed to educate people. How do you make the water safe to drink? Why do you need to feed your pregnant woman as much as you feed your cows and the buffaloes when they are pregnant and they deliver? That's the message that we give. When you want to milk the cow, you feed the cow. So you want your baby to be fed by your mother, feed the mother. And why do we need to build toilets? There are subsidies. So the third loan that Baby Devi took was to build a toilet in the house. And she also got the subsidy from the government because she learned how to apply for the subsidy from the government through our health education program. And the people who were very thrilled were her mother-in-law and sister-in-law. And before that, what happened when she joined the program, the first offer was for them to come and stay with us in a hotel. And in India, women do not go out alone and stay in a hotel unless, of course, you're more morally bankrupt, you are a commercial sex worker, then of course you can go out and stay in a hotel. So her husband would accompany her for the first couple of months to see where this woman was going. And her brother-in-law would taunt her over 4 months. At the 4th month, we offered a first aid training program. And when she went in there and saved the life of one of the cousins of her husband because he got into a fight and took fertilizer poison, drank fertilizer, she was the first one who was called, and she mixed salt water and gave it to him, and she saved his life. Then, of course, she became the most important person in the village. And today, when we go back, that is the only story Baby Devi tells me. She says, that day, I was a prostitute because I went into a hotel with alien men. And today, I'm a lifesaver. I was called by my husband's name or my son's mother, but today I'm called by my name and sister. She's called as Baby Didi. That means elder sister, that much respect the community has. And the second part of it, we talked about, Chris talked about access to healthcare services. What we realized was people were not buying the whole course of medicines because they could not afford to go to the hospital or buy the whole course of medicines. And this I still remember over coffee. Chris talked to me about it. We are on this bank of the river, and the hospital is on the other bank, and we need to build the stepping stones. Yeah. And the stepping stone is, the first stone was the preventive health education, and the second stone that we have built right now is access to very, very basic primary health care through a health savings pool, a small health savings pool within the community, and a network of hospital and pharmacy so that they can take a loan which is available 24/7 at the village, small loans, and go in and access quality health care and the whole course of medicine. That's the second thing that we created. And the third step right now, which we are putting in, is a livelihood, income generation, or jobs. We are creating jobs for these women so that they can continue working in their community, providing health care, and be able to sustain not only themselves, but also the rest of the community. Today, I'm proud to say Baby Devi manages the sanitary napkin production unit in a remote area in Bihar, and she supplies. She manages a group of 9 women, 10 other microfinance women, and they produce sanitary napkins, and that is distributed through a chain of about 2,500 community health facilitators who are reaching out to about 2 million population. And today, Healing Fields and Opportunities Sanitary Napkin Unit, I think we have sold the maximum, as an NGO, we have sold the maximum number of sanitary napkin today in the country. About 100,000 women have access to this. And this is something, is a big achievement for Baby Devi and the women. And the demand is so much that we are not able to meet the demand. And so the next step for us is to, as Vicky told in the morning, we have a partnership with Stanford because, again, India, even though we have produced the maximum number of technocrats as well as medical professionals in the world, we do not have enough doctors and nurses. So we are creating a para-worker, one para-worker for one village, so that it goes beyond just the microfinance, beyond just the financial inclusion, but also to be able to create access and health care to the whole community per village. So we will be starting it early next year. So this is an experiment, a journey that we are on.
That sounds great. So Nathan, in the negative 4 minutes that we have left, fortunately, a number of us have heard, I think most people have heard of the great work that we're doing in EduFinance, both in terms of extending loans to proprietors and also to parents. But I'm hoping you can tell us really briefly, which I know is a challenge normally, why, so Opportunity is bringing EduFinance to Asia. Why don't you please share with us why and briefly how?
Sure. So those of you who have attended our education breakouts know that we like numbers in education finance. And the numbers that I'm going to share with you briefly are basically that we have, up until this point, created in the last 4 years in education finance approximately 154,000 new seats in low-cost, pro-poor education in developing world context. 154,000 new seats. In our financial institutions, in any financial institution, we are not allowed to take more than a 20% share of their balance sheet, right? It's called sectoral risk limits. So we don't want to put more than 20% of the lending dollars going out the door into a single sector in case something happens systemically in that sector. It's good financial practice. At this point, in our 6 largest partners, primarily in Africa, we're at 15.5%. And during our peak months, which is right now, we're adding about 1% to that every month. We're running out of runway here. We're big, we're growing bigger, we have a proven model. A lot more people are buying into it, and we need greener pastures. Greener pastures in this world are more out-of-school children. Population-wise, 4.4 of the 7.1 billion people on this planet are in Asia. And 25 of the 57 million children out of primary education are in Asia. Natural fit, right? We're looking for scale. We're looking to take a proven model, bring it to the rest of the world, and bring it to the world that's in need. And that, for us, exists in Asia. And how are we going to do this? It starts with the Avikas. It starts with what Chris and Mukti have been talking about. It starts with the partnerships that Vicky and others on the stage have really underpinned. The financial institutions that we're working there with in India are a starting point for us to grow. We have mentioned in our breakout sessions, and many of you will hear about this, over the next 5 years, we are bringing social capital to this space to the tune of about $400 million to scale our education finance program. And that's going to require a lot of financial institutions who are socially focused, and it's going to bring us to a lot of out-of-school children. We're creating an engine in education finance that in 5 years' time will be producing on an annual basis approximately 400,000 new seats in pro-poor, low-cost education in the developing world. And we require green pastures for that. Diavikas, partnerships, leverage are what allow us to do that.
Great.
All right.
I believe we have time, I think, for a couple of questions. Anyone has some? There are mics out there.
There's
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah.
Hello. You have done a wonderful job of explaining what we're doing in education, Nathan, and how you're getting this engine running. But I know that you don't think that you have it all financed yet, and that there are pieces that all of us need to play for this to work. And so maybe you could talk to us just a little bit about that.
Thank you for that. So in education finance, we're going to get the capital. We're going to find the capital to bring to a significant set of financial institutions. To deploy that capital, we need a lot of people. We need an army of people, in fact, and we need support in bringing that army to bear. So our army of education finance foot soldiers are where we're going to be asking for your support to help deliver this capital where most in need, number one. Number two, we've recognized that alongside our lending programs, we're developing a massive channel straight to those who need education support the most. And we can do more than just lend and grow seats. We can help those seats become better quality and more impactful more quickly. And we're doing that through programs in repeated school level assessment and educational quality, doing that through teacher training, we're doing that through proprietor training and networking, we're doing it through what we call capturing micro innovations and publishing best practices around the globe and running and managing effective pro-poor, low-cost education. And to do that, we need another army. And that army comes in the form of developing this pro-poor quality education footprint alongside of our lending practices. In the long term, it will be sustainable and integrated into our lending services. In the short term, we have to prove it works. And we need investment to make that happen. And finally, we also need support in getting the word out about what we're doing. Some of the biggest foundations and best foundations that we've worked with here at Opportunity know what we do in education finance, and we're happy for that. And at this point, we are identified in many circles as the best practitioners in education finance globally in terms of what we do. But the world around us, other than the supporters that are central to us at the moment, don't really know that. And so this room and everybody in this room, we would ask for your support in helping us to get that word out. So I would call those the three areas where we're looking for support moving forward.
Yeah. I'd love to catch that ball too. So Hervé in the previous plenary talked about how important donor funds are for supporting innovation. By definition, innovation is perhaps a great idea that is unproven, or a great idea that's not fully understood. And I just want to suggest to you that the work that Kashpur and Healing Fields have been doing together is exactly that. Both organisations committed to one another, and frankly with opportunity support, with some financial resources that very, very trusting donors gave to us to assist in this. And all three organisations have been learning along the way. We are convinced that we have an incredibly efficient and proven community health leader program. But what we are not convinced about is whether or not that can represent a livelihood in its own right to the women. Clearly, we would like the job of community health facilitator in a poor community in northern India to be something that a woman can devote her time to full time, rather than having to run a small shop or look after a goat family or perhaps produce some food which she retails out of her front door or something like that. And there are possibilities that we would love to explore. But the kind of people who would like to support Nathan with structured capital for edu-finance loans are not going to come near Mukti and I while we try and experiment with the women to see if we can create a sustainable livelihood for them around the community health facilitator activity. Frankly and honestly, we need your help for that. And that's just an example. we know we should be paying attention to sanitation. You heard Mukti say and talk dramatically about something which I guess very few people in this room would have realised, and that is one of the most important things you can do for a woman and her daughters in northern rural India is build them a toilet. So we need to pay attention to sanitation. We need to pay attention to water. I mentioned that one of the major causes of under 5 infant mortality is simply diarrhea, and that's just E. coli in the water system. It's partially caused by open defecation, which is just prevalent throughout India, but it's also caused by the fact that people don't access treated water facilities. That's something we need to pay attention to. Do I have the answer? No. Is it important to capture the impact we could bring to those communities? Oh, completely yes. Do we want to go on a journey to find that solution? Absolutely we do. Will we need capable partners to work with us to go on that innovation journey? Absolutely we will. Are the community health facilitators part of that? Absolutely they are, because they are the people with the affinity and the integrity and the trust to convince the community to change their behaviour. No amount of wells and toilets will matter if they are unused and the community continues its open defecation practice. So, women's agency, the idea that there are women who want to bring about positive change in their communities and figuring out how we can support them is an absolutely rich field for innovation. So please, please, help us go on that journey. Support the women themselves who want to bring about generational change, especially for their children.
And what I can add to what Chris said is, today maybe the community health facilitators that we are training, we may not be able to even look at beyond providing possibly additional income, not a complete income. What it does, the training and the empowerment that we create for the woman saves lives and limbs. And even though the whole world has been talking about India being the generation of the future, the emerging market, you're going to have a malnourished market if you're not going to be right now trying to get them to support themselves. And one other thing that I would like to add, the community health facilitator training that we are offering is not for free. It is grant-driven, no doubt. It is hugely grant-driven, and I'm not embarrassed to say that. The woman pays 100 rupees, which is about $2.50 a month, plus she gives up 4 days of work and pays for the travel, and that works out to approximately about $15 a month, which is a lot of money for the poor woman. It's highly subsidized. But when you're talking about primary education, when you're talking about primary health care, all of us have benefited from somebody else paying for us.
That's true.
Our women become the Google of the village. Our women become the talking, walking wiki of the village. Today, the doctor prescribes something, we go home and Google or just pick it up on the iPhone and Google, we don't pay a penny. Somebody else pays for that. So I think it becomes our responsibility for the future generations.
Great, thank you.